Rachel, we're 30 seconds to live.
30 seconds to Shaw.
So I'd like to welcome everybody to our council meeting this evening. I want to thank and recognize our media partners and our broadcasting partners for reporting on our meetings and broadcasting them. It is nice to see Elaine back in the building. I want to acknowledge that Councillor Hollingsworth is with us. She's with us by video conference, and Councillor Hilsinger is absent. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge with respect that the land upon which we are meeting is the Robinson Huron Treaty Territory, and it is a traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, known historically as Bowatang. Bowatang is the home of Garden River First Nation, Bechuana First Nation, historic Sault Ste. Marie Métis Council, and the head office of Missinaba Cree First Nation. I also want to acknowledge with gratitude the Indigenous Friendship Center and the good work that it does here in Bowatang. Madam Clerk.
Under agenda item 2, I have a motion by Councillors Gardy and Dufour, resolved that the minutes of regular council meeting of March 21, 2022 be approved.
All in favor? Motion is carried. Madam Clerk, before we go to pecuniary interest, I am going to actually take the opportunity under section 3 to go to the CAO. We have a senior staff member who will be retiring soon and leaving us, and this is his last meeting. So the CAO is going to have an opportunity to recognize his significant contribution to our community. Mr. White.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this will be the final council meeting for our Director of Engineering, Don Elliott. Don is retiring. At the end of the month. I've known Don since we were both 15 years old, and we were part of a large group that went on a canoe trip from just north of Cochrane up to James Bay. And it was a trip most notable for raining every single day we were on it. Since then, our paths diverged away. I started at the city in fall of '88, and about 10 or so years later, Don joined us after some time in the private sector, both engineering and at Sault College as an instructor. We've been very glad to have him. Don has been the city engineer for, I believe, about 17 years now. And he has been a tremendous asset, both for staff and for the various mayors and councils that he has talked or worked for. As anyone would know, Don is always a very even-keeled person who can take a lot of complicated engineering issues and bring them down to something that's clearly understandable both for council and the public. Don, I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself and senior management for the time you have spent here, all that you have assisted us with, and I want to wish you all the best in retirement.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Don, before we come to you, and I'll give you a chance to make a few comments, I did want to express my gratitude both on my behalf and on City Council's behalf. You have been an exceptional city engineer and served your entire community in this municipal corporation very well. You're a man of intelligence, integrity, and you are a very kind person. So it has been a tremendous opportunity to work with you over these last 7 years, and I want to express my appreciation for the solid and fantastic guidance that you have given to council throughout your entire tenure. You are, in every sense of the word, a professional. We thank you for it. So on behalf of council, we appreciate your contribution to your community and to our municipal corporation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Malcolm. It has been a privilege, of course, to serve the city. I've enjoyed being a part of this team. There's a lot of good people working at the city. I've been involved in hundreds of capital projects, but I haven't done any by myself. I enjoy an excellent team of engineers, technical staff, and administrative staff. They're the ones that do all the work, and they're the ones that deserve the credit. The building division is doing great work in very difficult circumstances these days. as is the building services group. But when it's time to leave when you start rebuilding the things that you were involved in building in the 1980s. And that's the case for the West End treatment plant. So I think that's a good time to leave. You can ask me later about offline about some stories about Malcolm on that canoe trip. They are worth telling. But thank you, Christian and Malcolm, for your kind words. And I wish God's blessing for a prosperous future for you and for the city. Thanks.
Madam Clerk, item number 4, please.
Under agenda item 4, declaration of pecuniary interest, Councillor Nero has declared with respect to the architectural and engineering services RFP for the relocation of Mill Market, as his daughter is employed by one of the proponents submitting a proposal. Councillor Shoemaker has declared with respect to the access agreement of 273 Old Garden River Road, both the report on consent and the associated bylaw, as one of the parties to the agreement is a client of the law firm. And Councillor Shoemaker, I think there was something, the Royal Canadian Legion, which is 7.31, I believe, as it is a client of the law firm.
Councillor Gardy, did you have something you needed to declare? Thank you. Anything else, Council? Okay.
Then under agenda item 5, a motion by Councillor Scott and Bezo Allen, resolved that the agenda for April 11, 2022 City Council meeting and addenda number 1 and 2 as presented be approved.
All in favor? Motion carried.
Under agenda item 6, proclamations and presentations, agenda item 6.1 is a proclamation for the National Day of Mourning.
Whereas the National Day of Mourning is held annually on April 28th to commemorate workers who have been killed, injured, or suffered illness due to workplace-related hazards and incidents. Whereas the purpose of the Day of Mourning is to remember and honor those workers and to renew commitment to improve health and safety in the workplace. Whereas April 28th was chosen to be the National Day of Mourning as it coincides with the day the Workers' Compensation Act received its 3rd reading in 1914. Whereas the Canadian flag on Parliament Hill will fly at half-mast to workers and employers across Canada will observe this day by lighting candles, donning ribbons, black armbands, and observing moments of silence. Now, therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim April 28, 2022 as the Day of Mourning in the City of Sault Ste. Marie in recognition of workers killed, injured, or disabled on the job.
Agenda item 6.2 is a proclamation with respect to the Daffodil Campaign.
Whereas the Canadian Cancer Society is proud to be a champion and voice for people who care about cancer and remains committed to uniting and inspiring Canadians to take control of the disease. Whereas through the Daffodil Campaign, funds are raised to invest in research that will change the future of cancer and further development of a support system that makes life better for those who are affected by it. Whereas Canadian Cancer Society volunteers in Sault Ste. Marie, along with local donors, are united by the same overarching goals: helping people live longer and improving the lives and experiences of those affected by cancer. Whereas the daffodil is a symbol of strength, courage, and life for those living with cancer, and for Saultites to rally around by donating, buying a daffodil pin to wear proudly, buying a digital daffodil to honor in memory of a loved one, or volunteering. Now, therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim the month of April as the Daffodil Campaign.
And under agenda item 6.3, World Autism Day.
Thank you. I'll read the proclamation, and then I'm going to give Councillor Vezoallen a chance to speak. Whereas World Autism Day will be recognized on April 2nd, 2022 in Canada, thanks to Senator Jim Munson's Bill S-206, an act respecting World Autism Awareness Day. Whereas autism spectrum disorder, ASD, affects more than 135,000 Ontarians. ASD is neurodevelopmental disorder affecting 1 in 66 Canadian children, as well as their friends, family, and community. Approximately 1 to 2% of the Canadian population is on the autism spectrum. Whereas ASD is a spectrum disorder, which means it not only manifests itself differently in every individual in whom it appears, but its characteristics will change over the life of each person as well. A child on the autism spectrum will become an adult on the autism spectrum. Whereas Autism Ontario is the leading source of information referral on autism and one of the largest collective voices representing the autism community. Since 1973, Autism Ontario has been providing support, information, and opportunities for thousands of families across the province. Whereas Autism Ontario is dedicated to increasing public awareness about autism and the day-to-day issues affected by individuals with autism, their families, and the professionals with whom they interact. The association and its region share common goals of providing information, education, supporting research, and advocating for programs and services for the autism community. Now, therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim April 2nd, 2022 as World Autism Awareness Day in the City of Sault Ste. Marie. Thank you. Councilor Bezo-Allen.
Thank you very much. I also want to recognize the work locally that's done by the Algoma Autism Foundation, as well as, really put a big shout out to all of the educators, the caregivers, advocates, self-advocates, and service agencies such as Thrive and Community Living Algoma and private providers. There's going to be a lot of changes for services to children and youth. So I advise people to go on the Autism Ontario website to get more information. And another big important thing is looking at the last year it was inclusive employment was the theme through the UN. This year it's inclusive education as the theme with the UN. And I think we can all benefit from being more inclusive in terms of both education opportunities and employment opportunities for folks with all kinds of barriers. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Under agenda item 6.4, Earth Day.
Whereas the first Earth Day was celebrated on April 22nd, 1970, with the goal of inspiring environmental awareness and encouraging the conservation, protection, and appreciation of our nation's natural resources. Whereas the steps we can take to protect and preserve our natural environment through education, partnership, and positive actions should be encouraged by the City of Sault Ste. Marie. Whereas the City of Sault Ste. Marie, the Sault Ste. Marie Regional Conservation Authority, and the Kensington Conservancy, through their efforts, support the preservation of our local environment and have partnered to promote biodiversity, the conservation of our natural environment, and the Algoma area's first ever Earth Day Bio Blitz. Whereas Earth Day provides an opportunity to make a difference in our community, Sault Ste. Marie invites all residents and business to participate in the area's first ever Earth Day Bio Blitz, April 22nd to April 24th, 2022. Help make a difference to biodiversity and sustainability by creating a living record of species you encounter and add to a growing database through iNatural staff. Now, therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim April 22nd, 2022 as Earth Day in Sault Ste. Marie. Encourage all residents, businesses, and institutions to use Earth Day to celebrate the Earth and promote the well-being and protection of their environment.
Under agenda item 6.5, Jewish Heritage Month.
Whereas Statistics Canada notes that the Jewish population in the country is approximately 400,000 people, more than 1% of the total Canadian population, making it the fourth largest Jewish population in the world. Whereas the Jewish community has a long and proud history in Canada, and has made significant contributions to the well-being, growth, and prosperity of Canada while overcoming tremendous obstacles. Whereas the Jewish people have excelled in a wide range of endeavors, including the arts, sciences, the law, architecture, media, finance, entertainment, and business, significantly contributing to Canadian life. The month of May is meaningful for the Jewish community around the world. In 2018, Parliament adopted Bill S-232, an act respecting Canadian Jewish Heritage Month, designating the month of May as Canadian Jewish Heritage Month, thereby recognizing the important contributions that Jewish Canadians have made to Canada's social, economic, political, and cultural fabric. Whereas Parliament declared the Canadian Jewish Heritage Month would provide an opportunity to remember, celebrate, and educate future generations about the inspirational role that Jewish Canadians have played, continue to play in communities across the country. Whereas B'nai B'rith is a Jewish human rights organization that has been active nationally in Canada since 1875. Is inviting municipalities to enhance Parliament's declaration of the Canadian Jewish Heritage Month by adopting their own motions and promoting the celebration of the Jewish Heritage Month within their territory each May. Whereas Sault Ste. Marie has benefited from the contributions and leadership of the local Jewish community through the establishment of Congregation Beth Jacobs in 1945 to the local service clubs and institutions supported by volunteers who were and are members of the Jewish community, to the several successful and longstanding businesses opened by Jewish business people. And therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, declare that commencing May 2022, every month of May be celebrated as Jewish Heritage Month in its territory. and we recognize that the contributions of the Jewish community to the success of our country. Thank you.
And under agenda item 6.6, Community Living Algoma Awareness Month.
So whereas Community Living Algoma has provided supports and services to people with intellectual disabilities and their families in the city of Sault Ste. Marie and surrounding district since 1945 and provides service to 335 adults and 397 children across the district of Algoma. Whereas Community Living Algoma's goal is that people with intellectual disabilities have every opportunity to participate fully in our community with dignity, independence, and acceptance. Whereas Community Living Algoma works with Sault Ste. Marie volunteers and other stakeholder groups and organizations to promote citizenship for people with intellectual disabilities so that they have the rights and responsibilities and the opportunities that come with belonging, participating, and contributing as a valued member of society. Whereas Community Living Algoma Awareness Month is a province-wide initiative created to celebrate the values of community living, which are inclusion, quality, and respect. And therefore, I, Mayor Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim May 2022 as to be Community Living Awareness Month in the City of Sault Ste. Marie.
And that will bring us to consent.
So, Council, we are on the consent agenda. Matters on the consent agenda, Councillor Gargi.
722, just one item, Mr. Mayor, the railway crossing report.
Okay, go ahead.
Through you, to whoever from Public Works. I appreciate the report coming back. I personally wasn't aware of there being 34 railway crossings in total. I thought there were a couple of dozen, but the substantial number throughout the Sault area. It said in the report that generally the rail company is responsible for maintenance inside of the railroad ties, while the city is responsible for maintenance outside of the rail ties. It seems that isn't always the case. I was wondering if we could get a bit of an explanation, please.
Mr. Perry is the author of the report. He's here with us, Mr. Perry.
Perfect, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy. The rail is responsible within the railroad ties, but sometimes they will ask for the city forces to assist with any repairs that they're undertaking.
Okay, thank you. The report had cited, and I did get some clarification from Michelle, but just for the public's sake, the report cites the capital reserve that was established in 2019 to provide a funding mechanism for future repairs. Michelle, could you just answer what the balance is and how many funds are in that capital reserve as of right now?
You, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy. As of December 31st, 2021, there was a reserve balance of 150,000. As well, we have the additional allocation for 2022 of $50,000.
Perfect. Thank you. The report also referenced, and I quote, it says, staff will work towards improving communication with rail companies in order to establish a long-term maintenance program, which will be reported to council before commencing, as reserve funds must be approved. So is it fair for me to assess that we don't necessarily have a long-term maintenance program, or we haven't, or we did have one and now we're just looking to see what we're doing in the future? Through you to Mr. Perry or Ms. Hamilton Beach, if she's on the line. Mr. Mayor?
We'll let Mr. Perry take this.
Thanks.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy. In the past, the rail company has come forward typically in the construction season with any repairs that they're looking to make. So that notice has been fairly short.
Okay, but from our end of things, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Perry, we don't have a program in place looking at over the course of the next few years based upon our observations or what we know about the shape that these crossings are in. We don't know which ones that we would like to see tackled, or is that what you're alluding to in the report, that we're going to take a look at those things and communicate that to the rail company?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, yeah, we'll definitely be recommending crossing improvements to the rail company, but at the end of the day, it's their infrastructure, so they would be their prerogative what they're going to repair.
Perfect. Are you aware of any plans for this year of any crossings during this construction season which may be addressed as a result of the rail companies reaching out to you so far this year?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, at this time, no. We have started making good communication with the rail companies. There has been some turnover recently with those companies, so we have a pretty solid local communication now. So I expect if they are planning anything, we should hear from them shortly.
No, perfect. I appreciate that. The reason I brought the report forward a couple of years ago, or requested the report, sorry, was it was my observation, along with a lot of people that were giving me a call, at least for some railway crossings in the middle of the community, in the center of the community, and in the West End, that they were in pretty rough shape. You know, subsequent to that, over the course of the last couple of years, I have seen some substantial improvement in some of them, but they are a piece of infrastructure within the city, though we are not obviously totally responsible for. I think it's important that we stay on top of, considering our weather conditions and the way things deteriorate. Some of them, depending on the material, degrade quicker than others, especially if they're traversed by a lot of traffic. And I just think it's something that we as a community and Public Works needs to keep on top of, and we need to advocate for and work with the railway companies to maintain. That's it. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
On 7.22, Councilor Bruni? And on 7.22, Councilor President? Okay, go ahead, Councilor Bruni.
Thank you. To Mr. Perry. So you said the repair work is a responsibility of the rail company in between the rails, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bruni, that's correct.
So if it's, we'll say 2, 3 feet, 4 feet on the outside of the rails, it's the city's responsibility?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bruni, it's actually to the extent of the railroad ties, and beyond that would be the city.
So right now, and just to expand on Mr. Councilor Gardy's comments, I mean, we have the bottom of Second Line Hill, Wellington Street, Conmy Avenue. Right now, there are potholes in front of them, and I always thought that was the responsibility of the rail company. But you're saying that would be the responsibility of Public Works, we'll say, or the city?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bruni, that's correct. We do have to communicate with the rail company, and they'd have to provide a representative while doing work within that vicinity. But yes, that's the city's responsibility.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, nobody else in 7.22? That was it? You only had one matter, Councilor Gardy? Okay, so Councilor Vezo-Allen?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's 7.13, the mobile retail units, to Mr. Lamming. Mr. Lamming, in the application for vendors to these units, what is going to be the criteria?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Vezo-Allen, the criteria of evaluation will be the degree to which all the objectives of the mill market are met, the location and fit under that, namely activating the space, increasing foot traffic and offerings, providing opportunity for local products and services. There's also quality and clarity of the submission, demonstrated experience and qualifications, and financial responsibility.
Is there going to have to be a business plan included with that, or is it just going to be an application?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Vezo-Allen, there will be a requirement for a business background plan as part of the submission.
Okay. And then time frame for these units, are people able to rent them for shorter periods of time, like for a pop-up, or is it for the entire season?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Vezo-Allen, there'll be 3 units, and the plan is to have all 3 rented for the season, which would take place in June, if available, all the way through to October, with the potential to extend if available.
So the preference is to have one vendor for the long term for the entire duration of the season?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Vezo-Allen, that is correct.
Okay. And then my only other question is, when these applications are received for vendors, who is the deciding authority for who gets to use these mobile units?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Vezo-Allen, the Mill Market Evaluation Committee will be the ultimate decision-making authority, and this is being conducted through a lease amendment here tonight in their lease agreement, and also a license of occupation for the secondary space.
And there'll be a requirement that they'll have secondary insurance as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Vezo-Allen, yes, that is a condition that they must have $2 million in insurance.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lamming. Nothing further.
Anybody on 7.13? Okay, thanks. Councilor Vezo-Allen, do you have anything else?
That's all. Thank you.
Councilor Bruni?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess question to our fire chief regarding the digital radio system, agenda 7.8.
7.8.
this new system that you want to install, is it fairly familiar with other fire services in Ontario?
Through you, Mayor Provenzano, to Councillor Bruni, yes, it is. It's a very common system in the province. And as far as local comparators, Sudbury will be encrypted in digital in the next 30 days. North Bay is already on this system, as well as Thunder Bay.
Would our police services and the EMS have the same system?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, police services is on this system. EMS is a digital system, and I was informed through the chief of EMS today that they actually thought by now they'd be encrypted, but they expect in the very near future through a program with the ministry that they'll be encrypted as well.
Thank you. And will there be any monthly or yearly support fees to keep the system operating?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, currently there won't be any additional cost of this. However, we do have in our approved budget a maintenance program for our existing radios. So if anything were to happen with damages, whatnot, it would be captured in the approved budget moving forward.
Thank you. And my final question is, I am glad a local business is the successful bidder, but my question is, why only one bid coming in?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, is my understanding through the procurement process, it was publicly advertised on the city website and also on the merit system. Unfortunately, I don't know why we didn't get any more offers or tenders for this program. It'd be nice to see a healthy competitive bid, but unfortunately, we only got the one offer.
Thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Chief Johnson. Similarly to what Councillor Bruni was asking about the police and EMS. So the police are on the same system. I just mind my ignorance. I don't know how often communication between the two needs to happen, but will the police units be able to decrypt the fire communications and you'll be able to communicate?
Through you, Councillor Scott, or sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Scott. It's our understanding that there's a patch process that can take place between the two agencies, so there's interoperability.
Okay, and just because it's a large expense, do we have any sort of guarantees built into the pricing or contract around specifications and testing? Like, are we doing a pilot, for example, to make sure it's going to work in our community, the range is right? I've done a lot of research on the P25 after this report came out, and I guess one concern is sometimes with analog, you know it's going to drop the signal, but with digital, it just goes from working to drop. So are we going to be doing some sort of trial just to keep ensure rather that firefighters are safe and the community is safe?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Scott, we've done our testing prior to putting this out to tender and through the procurement process, as well as before coming to you back in the capital budget process to make sure that we were chasing the proper system for our community. And we found that the P25 system will work well for us as much as it does for the police service.
Great. That is everything I've got. So thank you.
Anybody else on 7.8? Seeing none, Councillor Bruni, do you have any other matters?
Couple more.
You go ahead.
Agenda 7.10, purchase of the one motor grader. First of all, it would have been nice to see the comparison of the purchasing and the leasing would be very helpful. I guess my only question is why only one bidder again on this? Mr. Girardi.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruni, quite frankly, it may be a supply issue. It's very difficult, like with every piece of equipment right now to get it. So that could be it. But quite frankly, it is tendered similar to fire. It's put out in media. And this was the only one that came through. We're satisfied with the unit. We've had this unit. We have this unit going right now. And as far as lease to purchase, we leave that to finance. Perhaps the CFO can comment on that, but we usually have finance review before we proceed with going forward with either a purchase or lease.
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, the lease versus buy isn't necessarily always provided to council for, we do an analysis and we find the best value through the procurement
Councillor Shoemaker on 710.
Yes, thank you. Just with respect to the last sentence of the financial implications paragraph, it says here, there's a shortfall in the budget from financing this internally, as well as some other ones we bought. And then it says it will be assessed in the 2023 winter control budget and an operating increase added if required. Just clarifying, does that mean an operating increase will be requested of council if required, or are you just adding an operational increase into the budget?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, this would be a contractual obligation if required, because we've already approved the internal financing of all of these graders from 2020 and 2021, as well as the one that's on tonight's agenda for 2022. Just of note, in 2021, we're just completing the year end right now, and the winter control budget, even with the shortfall for those other graders that were purchased in previous years, the winter control budget came in basically on budget. But as you know, it was a very mild winter through 2021. So that's why we really want to evaluate it in 2023, along with the 500,000 that was previously removed from the winter control budget. So we have to bring all the factors together and see if it can be accommodated within the budget in 2023 or not.
It looks like the CIO has something to add.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker and the rest of council, I just remind you that we will also be doing a study this year. It's the second part of the winter control study, which will look at both how we do winter control and also how we budget. So it will be tied up as or assessed as part of that study as well.
Answers your question.
Well, that clarifies that there's an explanation there, but I'm still confused on whether or not this is an automatic increase in the budget if it's required.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, my understanding of the CFO's response was that it would be included in the adjustments that are brought forth as cost of maintaining services. So it would be an automatic increase rather than just an operating increase request brought to you.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That does clarify.
Okay, anybody else in 710? Councillor Bruni, your next one.
Yeah, 7.12 tender for asphalt. I'm glad that the tender did go out, and I guess to Mr. Girardi, when will the asphalt basically be received for the city, and when are these potholes are going to be worked at, I guess?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruni, well, certainly we're working at the potholes right now. We're running our recycler for that. But yes, now that the contract is open, we will communicate with Avery's. They are the successful one, and asking them to, as soon as they can get their plant running, we would certainly accept asphalt. It's usually, we usually don't get asphalt until about the end, pretty well the end of April, first part of May. But we'll wait and see if the weather turns around. Perhaps they'll get the plant up running earlier. So as soon as they make it, we'll receive it. We'll start putting it down.
Thank you.
Anybody else in 712? Councillor Gardy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Girardi. Just, I'm curious, who is providing the asphalt for this last construction season?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, it all depends on what project. I mean, for our projects, for the city, things that we do from Public Works, that would be just patching and that would be, last year, I'm not quite sure who the contractor was last year, but it'll be certainly one of the local ones. It might have been Pioneer, but I'm not sure.
Perfect.
But for the larger projects, it could come from whoever they decide that they choose to go to.
Understood. And thanks for that bit of sort of clarification. My comment is this, is that I'm hearing from a lot of people, as others are, about the conditions of the roads. We all know about the conditions of the road, and most people appreciate why they're in tough shape. One thing that I am hearing, and I don't know if there's any credence to it, is that the asphalt doesn't seem to sustain itself to the degree that it used to. I'll leave that for people who are better than I to assess those things to think about, but it's just something that I'm hearing often. I think a couple of my colleagues are as well, and I'm just putting it out there for your consideration. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, well, I think we have to be careful to not suggest that that's a result of last year's asphalt contract because, engineering can speak to this, public works can speak to this, but there is a process through which they check the quality of the asphalt as it's being kind of applied. One of the things that is affecting our roads dramatically is the thaws and the wet season and the melts and the thaws and the freezes. And it's a real problem when we go into winter with a really wet road base. And I think we've done that now for a couple of years, and we've had a lot of freezes and thaws and freezes and thaws, and that doesn't help anybody. So I think we got to be careful not to suggest that last year's road contract has anything to do with the state of our roads now. I don't think there's a correlation there, notwithstanding that people might be of the position. Sorry, Mr. CEO, were you pointing at?
Or Girardi had
So,
something else to
Larry,
say.
you wanted to offer something?
Yeah, certainly. Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're absolutely correct. The material that we use, every material is made same. It's tested, it's evaluated, so we know what material we're getting from project to project. It's just there's different suppliers, but our specific supplier for our use happens to, we choose and pick that one. But when there's a large project throughout the city, of course, whoever the successful construction company doing the work will pull the asphalt from wherever they see fit. But certainly all the asphalts are tested, so you're correct in that.
Okay, so I have Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Miro on the same matter.
Yes, your mayor.
Okay.
Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Don Elliott. Don, we can't let you off the hook so soon. I know that you have always been a very good person in trying to improve our roads. You have always raised the flag and been definitely a good supporter in our road maintenance. For the viewers at home, I think this may help. We do see that there's potholes, and we know that there's a number of streets that are on your list that will be resurfaced this year. Correct me if I'm wrong, my constituents in Ward 1 have been concerned about Black Road, Trunk Road, and so forth. Can you just refresh your memories if those roads are being resurfaced this year?
Mr. Mayor to Councilor Hollingsworth, Black Road between South Market and Black is the candidate for the Connecting Link funding. That application went in November. We still await the province whether they're going to announce or not. But those are, if we get that funding, it's 90% of the funding. So we don't do resurfacing on Connecting Links without MTO's assistance, because for every dime we spend, they spend 90 cents. So we wait to match with their schedule. But Trunk Road is the next one on that Connecting Link list.
Okay, so I'm assuming that they'll still fill in the potholes as a temporary solution, even though hypothetically, we may be successful.
Mr. Mayor to Councilor Hollingsworth, yes, the maintenance, everything with respect to the road except capital construction is the city's responsibility. So the good offices of Public Works will have to be relied on for pothole filling.
Okay, and my last question to you, usually you do a very good job in this, but remind the viewers at home, the list of the roads that are hoping to be tackled for resurfacing will be published or is currently published on our website?
Mr. Mayor to Councilor Hollingsworth, no, we're putting the resurfacing program together as we speak. We have probably $8 million worth of resurfacing candidates, and our budget is in the pre-approved budget is in the realm of three and a half thereabouts. So you will be seeing a report at probably the next meeting, if not the meeting after, with a recommended program.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. That's very helpful. And yes, potholes continue to be a real situation. But my last final question through you, Mayor, to Mr. Girardi. I know that, Mr. Girardi, you and your staff do an excellent job in keeping up to date on the latest trends, on the latest advancements. Is there anything else that we can do besides asphalts? Is there any new technology? Is there any new a science that you've heard about that we should be considering in the future to help with these potholes? Or is it just plain down to the right asphalt, the right temperature, and make sure it's not wet?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, well, certainly the secret is to get some dry weather. We had a long drawn out winter. People don't realize that we had several days of sub-zero temperatures, and we had a lot of frost heave, and it's still coming out, and it'll be coming out for the next while. What we do need is for it to stop snowing and cold nights and freezing, and so we can keep the temperatures above zero and hopefully get some of these patches done. But there's really no secret to it. And certainly, yes, if there's technology and something new out there, we're on it. We've brought new pieces of equipment. That's why we brought that recycler in for recycling asphalt. We were one of the first in Northern Ontario to actually do that. So we've been very successful with that. So we do look at technology. Unfortunately, there's some simple things that have to be done. We need to have good weather, and we have to have dry weather, and then we can get a real handle on the potholes, as we've done every other year.
Okay, thank you. And one last comment to Mr. Elliott, if through you, Mayor. Don, thank you for all your work with us, and I do also wish you a happy retirement. And that's all. Thank you, your Mayor.
Okay, anybody else? Sorry, Councilor Nero, I had you down there. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Girardi, through you, Mr. Mayor. In the description, we have 5 different asphalts listed. What's the difference there? I mean, obviously the grades are different for different jobs.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero. That's absolutely correct. The HL3 is the one that we'd use the most. That's the one you'd see on your city streets. If you go to 2, it'd be going into shimming and going into driveways. So the larger the number, the coarser the material. But primarily, we would use HL3. So that's the one we'll do a lot of our pothole patching with.
The final pothole patching.
Yes, that's correct.
When conditions are proper to fix them properly.
That's exactly right. We really do need to get some dry weather, more than one day.
So it's actually the weather, but not the type of asphalt that we're using in the interim, or we just can't get HL3 when we really want it.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Nero, yes, you're correct in that the plants aren't operating right now. But the recycled asphalt, the hot asphalt we're making with our recycler works very, very well. The thing that we have to use early in the season, which doesn't work so well, is when you get the cold patch, and it's just a cold patch tar. Now, the biggest problem again is you're getting a lot of water. And as much as you try and keep the water out of the hole, and out of the the water's still seeping in, and they don't get a chance to dry up enough to bond. So if you don't get any bonding, the asphalt's still going to come out with every time a tire crosses it. So that's why you'll see us repeat and do potholes, and we're trying to keep them filled until we can get first of all, until we can get drier weather, and that the hot asphalt that we put in will bond properly. So, but right now, using our recycler, we're seeing improvements, and we're seeing a little bit of dry weather too. So that's helping out.
One more question, Mr. Mayor, if I may, through you. Mr. Girardi, my understanding is that you and your staff are looking at the newest pothole machine that I believe Sudbury is using, Thunder Bay is using. When it comes to using those machines, is there a different asphalt, or are they using the same types of asphalt that we already are using?
Through Mr. Councillor Nero, sorry. Yes, they're using the same asphalt. It's just a matter of how you're applying it. And we've been looking at this piece of equipment, and keep in mind the city, quite frankly, about 15, 20 years ago, purchased it, and it was called the one-arm patcher. And it's similar practices to the one that is now, but of course, technology's changed a little. That one wasn't very successful. It was good in the rural areas. It wasn't good within the city, where there's a lot of traffic going over the potholes. It just couldn't compress them and leave a good finished product. So we are keeping an eye on this new piece of equipment. And of course, it's a substantial cost. I think it's close to $500,000. So we're taking a look at how successful it is. We've been chatting with Thunder Bay. Thunder Bay has one now too, and there's been a significant amount of maintenance to the piece of equipment. So we want to make sure if we're purchasing something that it's operating more than it's down. So right now we're on a wait and see, and if it proves itself down the road, certainly we'd be interested in purchasing and hope council will support it.
One final question, Mr. Mayor. Now, Mr. Girardi, when we're looking at the wait and see on how this machine, if it's successful or not, is the wait and see actually the application of the asphalt to repair the pothole and its ability to stay in the pothole longer, or is it the cost effectiveness of that job?
To Councilor, I think it has to be a combination of the both. I mean, you need to purchase a piece of equipment that's going to be cost effective, yet give you a good finished product. We don't know. I mean, as far as the finished product is concerned, we're still unsure how good that is because it hasn't proven itself at least long enough for us to, and we haven't had enough dialogue with our counterparts to know, how well it's doing. Certainly Sudbury is using it this year, so we're counting on them to keep us informed on the piece of equipment, but you're spending a lot of money, so it's got to be able to do the job for the right price, but it has to give you a good quality finished job too.
Thank you, Mr. Girardi. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Anybody else on the actual substance of the report, which is the tender of the asphalt contract? Anybody? Yes, so nobody else in that respect. I appreciate why there's a lot of discussion about this and why you're taking the opportunity to pivot from a tender report to all the potholes we're currently dealing with in our city. So I will say this on that topic, because I do think it's a topic that a number of people are concerned about and have reached out to a number of you on, is that our roads are old. So this has really nothing to do with what we might have done last year or the year before. It has something to do with long-term planning and budgeting properly. Our roads are very old. There were a lot of years where the budget was zeroed out and we didn't increase the budget to put more money into our roads. And there's lots of years where we didn't give additional funds to improve the roads when it was asked for by staff. So if you want to fix the roads and you want to improve the roads, you got to really focus on what you're budgeting at budget time. And I'll commend this group because we have allocated more resources to that. I think we've got over 2 million additional funds for this budget year. And I think the hope was that we would do the same thing for the following 2 budget years, because there's some funds that were made available by the federal government that we were taking advantage of there. So we will continue to have lots of potholes for years to come because of decisions of that were made years ago. And the only real way to address that is to increase the roads budget. And we'll never be able to increase it to the degree that it would need based on the age of our roads, but we can focus on that. Future council terms, if council chooses to. In any event, if we keep on seeing the weather we're seeing, you're going to keep on seeing the potholes that you're seeing. So, Councillor Bruni, is that the extent of your matters?
I have one more, but I'm going to defer it until Councillor Shoemaker and Scott speak on it because they're the movers and seconders. That's for the agenda item 7.19.
Okay, so so passion. Sure, no problem. Yeah. Any other matter, Councillor Shoemaker, matters of consent?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief one. 7.9, which is the tender for a aerial lift truck. No question. I just wanted to comment. For a number of years, we've been asking for staff to explain when something either doesn't meet specifications or when the low tendered bid is not accepted. And they've done that in this report, and they've done it very thoroughly. So I appreciate that. And I would hope that this is a new trend in purchasing reports that we can continue to see for all future decisions where it either isn't the low tender bid accepted or where it doesn't meet specifications. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, 7.9. Anybody else in 7.9? Councillor Shoemaker, anything else?
No, thank you. Other than, 7.19, but I think it's.
Yeah,
from
you're
consent.
accepting that, right?
Yes.
Pulled that from consent. Okay, so anybody else with matters on consent? Before I move off, I just want to been through quickly myself because I thought there was.
I should just point out that Councillor Gardy has declared with respect to agenda item 7.3 and the bylaw for election in the unorganized territory with Huron-Superior Catholic District School Board as he is an employee.
Councillor Dufour, you had a matter?
Yes.
Go ahead.
That's okay. 7.18, Mr. Mayor. I just want to offer my support for what I think is a great application. I think it's a really cool race and a great addition to tourism in our area. And, you know, I just wanted to point out the founder of the race, you know, Nick Brash has been a great addition to our community. It's really cool to see someone come up from Southern Ontario and really invest in that Northern lifestyle to the extent that he has, that he's actually founded and continued a race, tourism event for our community that really showcases what so many people in that demographic love about Sault Ste. Marie. So really happy to see this development fund application here and happy to support it as well.
That is the item I was looking for, Councillor Dufour, and those are essentially going to be my comments. So I reiterate and support what you said. Anybody else in 718? I think that's the extent of it for the consent agenda then.
I just had one.
Go ahead.
7.29, the rental housing incentive program extension to 2024. I just want to thank our planning staff for getting that back to us in a timely fashion. I think it's a really important piece of that whole housing ecosystem that every layer of government is trying to tackle right now. And I think that right now with revising our OP, having these kinds of conversations around the council table, it's something I wholeheartedly support. I think it's been a really successful program and I'm happy to support it tonight as well.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it for consent, Madam Clerk. And then we have the one accepted matter.
So I have a motion by Councillors Scott and Dufour resolved that all the items listed under date April 11, 2022, agenda item 7, save and accept agenda item 7.19 be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Carried. That brings us to 719. Councillor Shoemaker, am I starting with you?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you're aware, there's a motion moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Scott to proceed with the construction of Passchendaele Lane without the local improvement, without the benefit of the local improvement fees levied against the folks who have petitioned against them. I will say that while I would agree that this might be seen as a bad precedent to set, there's a difference between this petition and a petition against local improvements generally, in my view. And the difference is that in this case, the road doesn't exist and it is being built as a result of an environmental assessment, which has determined that this is a fix to a problem on Pine Street and a great, more general problem of access to the P-patch off of Pine Street. So this fix has been investigated along with putting lights at the corner of Pine and Pleasant, along with extending Northern Avenue all the way to Black Road, along with a couple of other iterations that were checked out through the environmental assessment process, which began in 2015. So we're now 9 years beyond when it began. Sorry, we are 7 years beyond when it began. And now this is about to be implemented, and for $14,000, there's the potential that we're going to set a fix back 2 years, which will be 9 years from when we started the process to when the fix actually gets implemented. And I think that's too long of a time frame. In fact, 7 years is probably too long as well, but here we are. And we have the opportunity to either spend $486,000 or $500,000 on the road. And I don't think there's much difference one way or another in terms of getting the job done. That's covered off by contingencies in the budget, in my opinion. So the difference between a regular local improvement petition and this petition is that in a regular local improvement petition, if someone were to object to having to pay local improvement charges because the road's being refinished or reconstructed, the road exists, it's there, it can still service the people who need to use it if there is to be a delay. In this case, the road isn't there, so it can't provide the service it's intended to provide, which is to fix the traffic problem at the corner of Pine and Pleasant. So that's where I think we can distinguish this petition from a regular local improvement petition we might get. And that's why I think we should proceed with the work without the benefit of the local improvement charges. If in the future, this road needs to be reconstructed and we levy local improvement charges against that reconstruction, against the property owners for that reconstruction, and there's a petition, I would say let's delay it until we can levy those charges. But in this case, because it's the first time this road is going to be opened, I think implementing the fix is more important than delaying the outcome for 2 years for the difference of 2.9% in the budget.
Councilor Nero?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for Mr. Rumiel on this. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Rumiel. Option 1 reads that we postpone the project for 2 years and then we apply again and we go to the OLT for approval. Why do we have to wait to 2 years? Why couldn't we do that right now?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, you have to, when you send the notices out, you have to identify that if this is petitioned against, that we will be taking this to the Ontario Lands Tribunal, and that was not articulated on the notices.
So it has to be a different notice. It has to include that in the notice.
That's my understanding.
But I think the question is, so what's with the 2 years? Though?
Yeah.
So the 2 years is spelled, the 2 years is spelled out in the regulation. In the
2 years is statutory, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a regulation that requires that we can't do it for 2 additional years.
That's correct.
Once you put the notice out the first time, you can't put a second notice out for 2 years. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
Your options are to do nothing, to not undertake the work, and to wait the 2 years and then redo the local improvement notices, and we would have to notify the residents that we will be taking this to the Ontario Lands Tribunal. I see Karen Fields is logged on. She may have something to add.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Dufour.
Just as a follow-up question, Mr. Mayor, through you to either Ms. Fields or Mr. Rumiel, I had the same question as Mr. Nero. Is there a reason why municipality would not, as a matter of course, put in the language allowing us to go to the OLT if it was petitioned against?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour. That's probably going forward. That's probably something we will put on every local improvement notice that we send out for proposed projects.
Yeah, I mean, as long as the OLT system remains what it is, it certainly seems like a pretty reasonable course to take. You know, to Councillor Shoemaker's point, I can certainly appreciate the fact that, you know, this plan has gone through multiple council votes of multiple different iterations of different councils, and it certainly feels like it's being held up on a technicality. That said, I guess I'm still struggling with the idea of precedent and wanting to ensure that the city doesn't end up having to not levy local improvement charges on other new roads that may go in. So as a final question, is there anything, Mr. Rumiel, that you would want to share from staff's perspective about why we may be able to forego local improvement on this small road and not endanger doing a similar thing on maybe a larger road in the future?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, are you asking if
I'm asking for a further opinion in light of Councillor Shoemaker's points about this being a new road construction and not simply a resurfacing local improvement. Does that change staff's perspective as it's outlined in the report with regard to the risk of setting a precedent, not levying local improvement charges?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, it's not very often that we do local improvements for new roads. So yeah, there is some merit
merit to that. Certainly this project is a city initiative, different than a reconstruction of a road where the residents are already abutting the street and their services are being replaced. Not sure that answers your question.
If you're looking for a further opinion, Councilor Dufour, maybe I can offer my perspective. I accept what Councilor Shoemaker's saying. It's credible and understandable. I'm not particularly concerned myself about setting a precedent. One is whatever decision we make doesn't bind a future council in any event. Councils often make different decisions from council term to council term, independent of what previous councils have decided. And two is, and I think this is really material. It is a new road, and it's a solution that we've kind of developed as a result of challenges that we're trying to deal with. And it affects a very small number of people. It's not often that you'd have a local improvement effect, I think 6 households, and it's a very small quantum, right? So I think if we do establish a precedent, I think it's one that's fairly easy to distinguish from future sets of circumstances where these same issues will be in front of council. I don't think councils will be often met with such small local improvements that affect a small number of households that really have kind of such a low quantum as far as the cost goes. So because of that, I'm comfortable supporting it. I think the germane point here is that we don't want to wait 2 years to implement a solution that we've determined is the best traffic solution for that area. So in that sense too, it's supportable.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. That was generally the answer I was looking for.
Okay,
thank you.
Anybody else on 719?
So I will first cast the motion which was the original motion as recommended by staff, and that is a motion by Councilors Gardy and Bezo-Allen, resolved that the report of the Manager of Design and Transportation Engineering dated April 11, 2022 concerning petition against Passchendaele Lane be received, and that the city postpone the construction of Passchendaele Lane for 2 years until 2024. And I have cast that.
Okay, so that's in front of you now. So all in favor on that motion? Opposed? Okay, so that's unanimously opposed. So that motion fails.
I see that. I got you.
She can correct you. Take a look. Mine just did. Yours not.
It delayed. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
So I have 10 votes voting against.
that would be correct. Now we'll read Councilor Shoemaker and Councilor Scott's motion.
The motion by Councilors Shoemaker and Scott resolved that council direct staff to proceed with the construction of Passchendaele Lane in 2022, and that the entire cost of the construction be paid from the city's capital budget.
All in favor? So that motion is unanimously carried. Thank you, Councilor Hollingsworth.
And that will take us to planning.
So we are in planning now then, Council. So that is
Application A222Z, 149 Kim Street. We have a motion by Councilor Scott and Dufour.
I think you missed 8.3.1.
It's 5:30 though.
I apologize. Yeah, sorry, it's 5:30.
Resolved that the report of the planner dated April 11, 2022 concerning rezoning application A222Z be received, and that council rezone 149 Kim Street from low density residential zone to low density residential zone with a special exception to permit, in addition to the uses permitted in an R3 zone, pet grooming services as a home-based business, subject to the following special provisions: prohibit the boarding and overnight accommodation of animals, permit parking in a required front yard as currently exists, and that the legal department be requested to prepare the necessary bylaw to effect the same. And the applicant, Laura Scott, is on the call.
Okay, so before we go to the applicant, I see Mr. McConnell there. Mr. McConnell, can I just ask you to give a precis of this application for the general public watching us at home?
Certainly, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. The subject property is on the west side of Pym Street, just a few houses up from Herrick. As the clerk mentioned, the application before council tonight is a request to amend the zoning bylaw to permit a pet grooming business. It is recommended for approval. Council should be aware that as a result of the public notice that went out to the neighbors, staff did not receive any comments or concerns from the neighbors. And I know that Ms. Scott has been in contact with the abutting neighbors on both sides of her house, and they are also in agreement with the request before council tonight.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McConnell. I do, Madam Deputy Clerk, can we put Ms. Scott? She's in the meeting? Okay, Ms. Scott, can you hear me? Christian speaking.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Did
Okay.
you want to address the application, Ms. Scott?
I'm not sure what that means.
Did you want to speak to it at all? Did you want to make any comments to council?
Oh, no, I think the application's pretty straightforward. And the person that I was working with at the city said that it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, so Madam Deputy Clerk, do we have anybody else registered to speak either in for or against the application? Council, do you have any questions of either the planning staff or Ms. Scott? Seeing none, we can call a vote. All in favor? Ms. Scott, your application was approved unanimously. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So then we'll go back to 8.3.1, Economic Development Program N1 Solutions. There's a motion by Councilors Gardy and Dufour resolved that the report of the Manager of Business Development dated April 11, 2022 concerning Economic Development Program proposal from N1 Solutions for business expansion and investment in 477 Queen Street East be received and that Council approve the investment of $100,000 through the Economic Growth Community Improvement Plan utilizing the Economic Development Program. And I should say that Josh Armstrong and Dan Hollingsworth with N1 Solutions are on the call.
Josh, Dan, welcome to council. Do we have, is Kathleen available or Mr. Vare? Who will be speaking to this on staff's behalf? Kathleen, welcome to council, Kathleen. So we'll take questions from council on the application. I don't have any. I'm just going to make a brief comment. I've toured through the downtown office and I just want to commend the leadership team and the entrepreneurs behind this business, Mr. Gregorini and his team. There's a tremendous amount of activity there, and they're doing really a lot of really interesting things. It's exciting to see, and I personally really recognize and appreciate a very significant investment in our downtown and really bringing a very sizable private sector employer right to the heart of the downtown. So I don't have much to ask about this application. Kathleen, thank you for your work on it. I see Dan there on the screen. Dan, thank you for your work on it and making the effort to work with us on this. I appreciate the opportunity to support N1, and I'll be voting in favor of this application. So we'll take questions now. I have Councillor Hollingsworth, then I'll go to Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you. Through your worship to City Clerk, I'm going to abstain from voting just because I do have a relation with Mr. Dan Hollingsworth. I should have brought that forward earlier. I apologize.
Okay. I will record it.
Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Shoemaker.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I actually didn't have questions, but I wanted to say that the best we can hope for from our local businesses that they take money from outside communities as well as grow internally, but take money from outside communities and repatriate it to the Soo. And obviously with the expansion that's been happening at N1, that is exactly what they're doing. So it's great to see, and I'm happy to support this, not just for that reason, but that's one of the big reasons. And hopefully that success continues.
Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker. Councillor Hollingsworth, just for the record, we're going to note you as having declared a conflict because I don't believe the rules of procedure provide for an abstention.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I have Councillor Vezoel and then Councillor Scott.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Dan. Dan, just in terms of the job creation, in the report, it says anticipates 9 positions that will be directly attributable to the $100,000 that's getting put to do your enhancements to your IT. Could you just give us a breakdown in terms of, average salary? These are permanent, full-time, that type of thing, and where kind of your recruitment base is coming from?
Sure, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen. Delighted to answer that question. The positions are basically going to be all as a result of our expansion in the ICT sector. As the council report that Kathleen put together denotes, that we've done an aggressive move into providing third-party solutions for other customers in the ICT space, as well as in some of our client support solutions. So the positions are well-paying jobs. They're permanent full-time positions. We have a very competitive salary and benefits package that we offer to all our employees here at N1 Solutions. As far as recruiting efforts, we are recruiting across Ontario and across Canada. I think most people see our recruiting efforts we're very active. And we're finding people from Southern Ontario, across Western Canada. We've hired some people from across Northern Ontario as well.
That's great. Thanks very much, Dan, for the information.
Okay, so I have Councillor Scott. Can we give Councillor Scott his mic, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make it brief. It's just comments, and between yourself and Councillor Shoemaker, I feel like the comments are covered in that sense. But I would actually like to commend the report itself. I found it was actually a really well-written report, and it was concise, it was informative, and not often do we give credit to staff for well-written reports, but I really enjoyed reading this one and thought it was well done.
Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Gardy.
Thanks. I'll be quick, Mr. Mayor. You kind of alluded to it. You said you were on a tour, but to me, it's pretty remarkable the number of things that N1 Solution is tackling these days. I wonder if Mr. Hollingsworth could please kind of enumerate the myriad of services that N1 Solutions provides, just for the community's sake. Would you be willing to do that, Mr. Hollingsworth?
Sure, thank you, Councillor Gardy. Through you, Mr. Mayor, N1 Solutions, obviously some tremendous growth over the last couple of years. Quite proud of what we've achieved from our rebranding and some of the marketing material that we've developed. But we've certainly looked at diversifying, creating a management group that looks after a number of different companies. So we have our security division, which we're quite proud to say that it's probably one of Northern Ontario's largest industrial security companies that does a lot of work across Northern Ontario. I'll keep this brief. Our ICT division, which we do all kinds of work in live monitoring solutions, as well as camera systems, security systems, but complete IT solutions for small and medium-sized companies across Canada. We probably have about 300 clients in that area. We're also getting in this year into doing complete fiber builds in communities. So we're working across Northern Ontario in 3 communities doing complete fiber builds. So doing similar work to what you would expect into your home with fiber connectivity. Also, we have our environmental practice that we launched in August of 2021. Quite proud of that, and that included an acquisition of Lashwa Brothers Contracting, which is a complete petroleum maintenance company as well as a contracting company. Finally, the last pillar of our organization is our strategy practice, which we do a lot of consulting across Northern Ontario and down through into Southern Ontario. So we do complete services and advisory services, support for small communities, as well as support for businesses in the region. And we got a couple of more interesting things coming up this year, so stay tuned.
We will.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else, Council? Madam Clerk?
I have read the motion and opening to vote.
All in favor? Application is approved unanimously. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Hollingsworth. Thank you very much for your work, Ms. Haynes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, members of council. Appreciate it very much.
And that will bring us to agenda item 8.8.1, which is a motion to replace a vacancy on the library board. It's a motion by Councillor Scott and Vezo-Allen. Resolved that Elizabeth Wood-Kamagad be appointed to the library board from April 11, 2022 until the remainder of City Council's term or until such time as a successor is appointed.
All in favor? Oh, you had a question, Councilor Shoemaker? Go ahead.
I sit on the appointments committee with Councilor Nero and Councilor Hollingsworth, I believe. And Elizabeth Kamika has an impressive, a very impressive resume for the position she's being appointed to. And so I think she'll be a great member of the library board.
Well, thank you for the whole committee for making a great recommendation. And I think we were in the process of unanimous vote. So let's just finish that off. Congratulations to Liz for the unanimous support.
And that brings us to agenda item 9.1, light pollution. I have a motion by councillors Hollingsworth and Christian. Whereas as defined by the International Dark Sky Association, light pollution refers to any inappropriate or excessive use of artificial light which affects humans, wildlife, and the climate. And whereas light pollution can be in the form of glare, sky glow, light trespass, or clutter. And whereas like excessive noise, light pollution can have a negative impact on a residential area. And whereas Sault Ste. Marie does not have an existing light pollution bylaw, now therefore be it resolved that staff be requested to review existing light pollution bylaws from other communities and make a recommendation on how a light pollution bylaw might be implemented and enforced in the city of Sault Ste. Marie.
Councillor Hollingsworth, would you like to speak to this? Is your motion?
Yes, thank you. The reason that Councillor Christian and I have brought this to the table is because we had a number of constituents in our ward that try to sleep, after 11, after midnight, and they have blinding lights from sources. I'm not mentioning any particular source, glaring right into their windows, even though they put up blinds, even though they try to work with the neighbors and so forth. And it's just, they can't sleep and it's impacting families. They can appreciate to have the lights on up till 11 o'clock, but 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, in our constituents' opinion, seems to be unfair. So Councillor Christian and I, we do listen to our constituents. And it wasn't just one constituent that brought this to our attention. And so we just want to see if staff can do some digging and see if this is a possible bylaw, see what other communities have done, if they have done anything. And we do have a noise bylaw, and I understand and appreciate that it may be hard to sometimes enforce this. But we do have a noise bylaw, and sometimes it may be hard to enforce that after hours, but it's a starting point. Let's just see what other communities are doing in respect to understanding that our constituents are concerned. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Christian, do you want to add to it?
Just briefly, in our discussions about this, as this came forward, it made sense that because we've got more infill initiatives and we're trying to find additional units in the community, we're going to get to a point where there's going to be so much, there's going to be so many units that we're going to require that lighting is going to become an issue. And although it may not be a major issue right now, it makes sense to at least look into a bylaw like this, because inevitably it's going to matter if it's not a huge concern yet.
Okay. Any questions from council? All in favor? Motion is carried.
Councillor Gardy, you're in the affirmative.
I am sorry, I've been locked in.
I can see that. Okay, so that is unanimous. And will bring us to bylaws. So a motion by councillors Gardy and Vezo-Allen resolved that all bylaws under item 12 of the agenda under date April 11, 2022, save and accept bylaw 2022-63 and 2022-70 be approved.
All in favor? Motion carried.
I have on 2020-63, I've lost my mover on account of conflict because Councillor Gardy declared a conflict. So can I?
I can move it.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
So motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Dufour, resolved that bylaw 2022-63 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of the agreement between the city and Daniel Fremlin Holdings, Inc. and the Huron Superior Catholic District School Board for access over the city property known as 273 Old Garden River Road be passed in open council this 11th day of April 2022.
All in favor? Motion carried.
So Councillors Shoemaker and Gardy both have conflicts, and has everyone else voted in the affirmative?
Yes.
Lady tonight. And again, on 2022-70, I've lost a mover on account of conflict. Councillor Bruni. But a motion by Councillors Bruni and Dufour, resolved that bylaw 2022-70 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of the agreement between the city and Huron Superior Catholic District School Board to conduct elections under their jurisdictions and territories without municipal organization in the Algoma District be passed in open council this 11th day of April 2022.
All in favor? Carried.
And again, I have that as a unanimous vote and with Councillor Gardy having declared a conflict. That brings us to a motion by Councillor Scott and Dufour, resolved that this council now adjourn.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you, council.